Yeah, hey, how's it going? I'm Michael Vallejo, educator. I'm passionate about teaching and learning, and first and foremost, supporting students.
Awesome, awesome. And how did you get into the field of education?
So I jokingly say I was raised by a family of educators, but truth be told, my mom was a teacher, but it wasn't until, gosh, I must have been fourth, fifth grade by the time she became an educator. But she had always been like the mentor type, the educator type. She just had to shore up her background in education to get herself to be formalized to become a teacher. And then I just spent an incredible amount of time in her classroom. So by proxy, I just absorbed kind of being in that classroom environment. And I actually audited a bunch of her teacher education classes, and some of her professors became my professors later on. And they remember me as a young boy sitting in the back of the classroom with a skateboard and a coloring book. So I jokingly say I went through teacher ed a few times here. But aside from that, I've always been the big brother and mentor type to the kids in the neighborhood, teaching them whatever the latest skateboard trick is, kind of how to dress cool. This is, early 90s, sagging our pants and, doing all that stuff and kind of
Mhm.
just role model and mentor. And so I always found a lot of value in that. Plus, I saw also how education was so transformative in my family's own life. It was a single handed action that my mother made to become a teacher that took my family out of the cycle of poverty. So
Yeah.
we were riding the city bus, and then boom, my mom got her first teaching job. We were able to get our first car. After she landed the credential in the teaching job, we got that car. We had health benefits, dental. We even took like a family vacation. This is stuff that we weren't privy to previously. So I
Yeah.
saw how transformational it could be. I saw how it could feed, one's soul as that mentor and supporting youth and the impact that we can make. And despite my best efforts trying to avoid it in my early 20s, it kept drawing me back in.
That's awesome. And so, you're in your early 20s. What was your major in education? What did you major in?
So I bounced around a few times, switching from business to child development, back to communications to elementary education. I eventually landed in the liberal arts and European art and architecture, which I have to say was a lot of fun, but I don't use at all.
Oh no, yeah, yeah. So then you got your degree in architecture, European architecture. Is that what it was?
Yeah, yeah, under liberal studies, yeah, if you can imagine.
So then what's your first job as an educator? What was the first one?
So it was running childcare centers. So this was in Orange County in the city of Fullerton, so Southern
Okay.
California. And I just actually came back from a study abroad program. I leveraged everything to get over to London, England. I jokingly say to work on my English. And so I leveraged everything to get over there. I came back and I was at that cusp. I was in my early 20s, kind of looking for direction. And of course, good old mom hands me the flyer. Hey, they're looking for an after school program lead.
Yeah.
And I thought it was going to be more sports oriented. I wanted to coach, wanted to play soccer. I'm like, oh, this would be great. Play football and soccer, with some kids. And next thing you know, it evolved into a pretty substantial role with a lot of like district office commitments. And I was still quite young at the time, but I learned how to navigate those systems through that role.
That's awesome. And how long did you work in that program for?
Oh, I want to say that was like 5, 7 years.
5 7 years. Wow.
Yeah, grew to like a mid-level director position, oversaw several school sites. This was after-school programs, early childhood programs. The entity that I work for, had a state and fee-based preschool, and then a state and a fee-based after-school program.
Mm.
And then this was kind of, I was in the mix. I was working with teachers, and I was attending IEP meetings and sharing testimonials on my students' behalf, and going to board meetings. And this is where I got bit by the bug and say I needed to formalize this and shore this up. California, as you know, we need a teaching credential. Let me go back and get my teaching credential, master's.
Yeah.
And this time I'm in my like later 20s, and I'm at that cusp of let's say switching and formalizing things, wanting to become a family man, looking at down the road, fatherhood and things like that. And I said, well, being a teacher, it's going to be great because it's in alignment with my values and my mission, and then also afford me a pretty decent life uh, to like kind of start my family chapter.
Yeah. So you become a special education teacher. Is that what it was?
I
Class.
did, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, initially was a sped teacher, Worked bounced around for a couple different districts on like shorter term contracts and temporary
Mm.
contracts, and then eventually landed at a district where I served at a high school. And I'll have to be honest, I wasn't in the classroom that long before there were some leadership opportunities.
Okay, how long was that? How long would you say you were
I
in the
would
class?
say 3 to 4 years of the grind, John, as you know,
The grind.
as a special educator. The first years are so tough, and I
Yeah.
have
Oh
so much
yeah.
love and profound respect for new teachers in the first couple of years of their journey. And so these teachers, it's just they're in the slog. They're balancing
Yeah.
IEPs, they're juggling parent emails, student discipline issues, classroom management, demands from their principal. They're usually at the cusp of a lot of change in their life, and they're juggling a lot. But I've found that if they could hang in there for about those 2, 3 years, there's light on the other side of the tunnel.
I think that that's where teachers will push back on administration. If you're only there for 2 or 3 years in the classroom and then you step into out of a classroom position, that's where teachers would push back on an administrator, somebody out of the classroom, because they're like, okay, this person was only in here. They've only been here like 3, 4 years. What do they know? That's nothing. The first year you don't know anything. The second year you're kind of okay. I kind of getting it. Then the third or fourth year you understand a little bit more. And so I feel like that's the pushback that teachers will give to administrators who step out of the classroom. For me, I was a it took me 16 years for me to get out of the classroom. It took me. I was a classroom teacher for 16 years, and I never. Deep down, I think when I first got my administration credentials, after I got it, I was like, I still don't want to be an administrator. I went through the whole program. I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And time passed, and I was like, what, I could only affect, if I'm in elementary school, like 25 students. If I worked in middle school, I could only really have a true impact on about 150 students right here. But if I go out of the classroom, become an administrator, then I could affect the entire school. And if I could change a school environment, then I might be able to change a neighborhood. And if I could change a neighborhood, I could change like just the whole community. And so that's the idea. That's why I stepped out of the classroom, was this idea that maybe one day I could, change a whole school, a whole community, a whole neighborhood. Maybe I could do that. And so that's what inspired me. But that pushback, though, I've seen it happen where, and I even said it myself as a teacher. If an administrator came out and they only had like 3 or 4 years under their belt, I'm like, what does this guy know? What does she know? Like
Sure. Yeah.
that would cross my path. I mean, those are thoughts I would just think about. Did you ever get pushback like that when you stepped
Oh,
out?
and still do. And, it's just that way. And, one's called a leadership. We can't necessarily pick the timing on that. Right. So that's to say, if we translated this to other things in our life, love and serendipity and all these things, we don't get to pick most
Yeah.
of the time. Right. And so, thank you for sharing a little bit about your story. And that's, very noble. And so, I have a very similar approach, and so I'm going to call that pushback that I received and likely you received the noise, and I would just drown the noise by staying focused to my mission. And mine was the same as yours: cast my net on a larger audience, so I could impact my high school students, maybe the teacher in the room next door to me, the teacher down the hallway, right? But I wanted more. And
Yeah.
at that point in my career, I was doing some professional development. I was leading like voluntary trainings at the district and county offices, just because for the love of doing it. And I really wanted to show what I did well, which was making those deep connections with students, but I wanted more. And so my desire to want to reach more people and more teachers and motivate and inspire and show how I made those connections was more powerful than the noise of adversaries or naysayers or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, yeah, and this same here, same here. Even this idea of this social media stuff and this podcast, and it's the idea that I could spread a message. Like I could reach such a bigger audience than I could as working at one school. Like I could, some of these clips on the podcast, or some of the clips I make, they're viewed by thousands of people. And to me, that's casting a larger net. If I can get my message out to as many people as possible, I feel like I might be able to change, a good amount lives, and help educators who are struggling and struggling with students with difficult behavior. Um, because I feel like there are a lot of educators out there dealing with behavior, and there's no real answers of how do we deal with these students, how do we help these students, and how do we help the teacher deal with some of these big behaviors that are happening in the classroom. And so, this whole podcast, this whole social media thing, it's how do I help? How can I help other people? And I think we talked about this a little bit before the podcast, where like you do put yourself out there. The more you're on you do put yourself out there, and you got to be careful. I think I said this to you earlier. It was like, I got to be careful as to what I say, so that I don't say the wrong thing, so that somebody doesn't take what I say out of context and then jeopardize my future because I've said something that might, be taken out of context or something like that. So it's a double edged sword, when I'm out here, doing the podcast, whatever. It's funny, the other day, I googled, Mr. Vergara the educator. I had never googled Mr. Vergara the educator, and I googled it, and I was like, oh my god, I cannot get away from it now. I can't get away from it. It's just like, brrr, like if I googled Mr. Vergara the educator or a difficult student, it'd be like, brrr, just tons of stuff, and I'm like, oh man, even if I wanted to just, you know what, I'm gonna hang it up, it's still there. I'm like, oh
It's
man,
all there.
yeah, I can't get away from it.
Well,
So
a couple thoughts. It just really speaks to your level of commitment to getting that message out there, and we do walk the line. I do the same thing,
yeah,
and at the end of the day, we still got to take care of us. Rent's due at the end of the month. Got to keep the lights on. Yada yada yada. It's important to keep our job,
no, absolutely.
but it is important for outlets like this to exercise free thought, free speech around current needs, and as you shared, um, classroom management, the discipline component, supporting students in a positive way. We know that teachers don't get enough, and teachers are burning out. Some of these teachers hit the ground running in their first job. They're in debt coming out of teacher ed. They maybe leased a new car, rent on a new apartment,
Hmm.
and they're locked into this job, right? And so the stakes are high, and or maybe they're just so locked into the desire and wanting to be a great teacher, the stakes are even higher, and so they have a lot invested. They need to be successful, and we know a lot of teachers do burn out initially, and so giving them strategies, tools, first and foremost, and then second, just like sharing transparently like you do, on your social media post, and you're taking care of yourself and showing about wellness, and your diet and your exercise and your family expanding, and et cetera, et cetera. It's really important for people to see that authenticity. So lots of love to what you're doing for
I
sure.
appreciate that. Appreciate that. You work with new teachers, correct?
I do, yeah. So I work with teachers in their teacher credential program.
So, what are the questions that they ask you? Like new teachers, what are they asking? And because I'm sure they have tons of questions about what is it like to be in the, what do they ask you?
Yeah, so I guess I should preface it by saying it's hard for them to conceptualize because they
Hmm.
don't quite know yet, at least in the start of the program. So the questions at the beginning I teach classes throughout a sequence of a teacher ed program, but I
Hmm.
have the benefit of having my student teachers like right at the end of the program. So they're in their field work, they're getting those 15 weeks of unpaid student teaching done to meet the state requirement to get their credential. At the beginning of the program, it's like, okay, I got it, and I think I can do this, right? Yeah, that's coming from a good place. I know, I have the same reaction,
Yeah.
and I can make it happen, and then the questions evolve to how how could I make this happen? How could I make it to the holidays? How could I make it to summer? What if this happens in my classroom? Or yesterday, this happened in my classroom. There was a child throwing desk tables or whatever. What do you do? And so
Hmm.
these are the type of questions. The other type of questions I get is, how do you manage all this? How do you manage your time? We see you, Dr. B, posting, and you're doing things, and you're always bouncing around doing one thing or another. How do I manage my time? So those are a couple of the top questions. And then they always have that reflective moment, like, is this for me?
Yeah.
And this is kind of where I chime back in And I remind them of something that I started with them when they were at the beginning of their teacher education journey. And we create a teaching philosophy. So, like, why'd you get into teaching in the first place? How do you teach? How do you convey your values and beliefs in the classroom? And then how do you show up for your students? So I kind of put them in the driver's seat, like, okay, respect, kind of ground themselves into why they got into it, but also be reflective. Like, how are you showing up for your students every day? How do you think your students perceive you?
Yeah.
And I bet I believe that you probably have a similar experience as I did. It comes in seasons in our career. There are times, John, where I didn't quite show up for my students as they needed me. I had stuff going on in my life. You know, my world's crumbled a few times as I was a classroom teacher, and I just wasn't able to meet my students' needs. We barely got through. I'd go up there, I'd drill and kill, I'd lecture, I'd do whatever to pass the. I was a high school teacher, the 50-minute period, just to get to the end of the day. That was some periods or seasons of my career. Other seasons, and as I learned more and I knew better, I did better. And so this is kind of where I focused on behavior. And then I drilled down deeper and said, okay, well, okay, every behavior has an antecedent. So there's a reason for every behavior. And then even further, well, I'm not spending enough time on relationships. And this is where I came to the notion that, yes, while I teach standards, that's important to have a standards based curriculum. Even more important, and first and foremost, I teach students. And so my old district used to have that philosophy. We teach students, not standards. And so that's where I started switching to more of a social and emotional approach and reflecting on how I showed up for my students and how I met their daily needs.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I feel like when I think about me being a new teacher, I remember my first experience was the principal just opened the door, and it was I love this principal, but he gave me the keys, he opened the door and said, here you go, get to work, like here it is, and I had like a day to look it through the curriculum. There was like these old stack of curriculum books up there, and I'm like, okay. And at this time, I didn't even have my credential yet. I was a I worked at a Catholic school. I had a bachelor's degree in social work, and you were able to get hired at a Catholic school without a teaching credential. So I didn't even go through the whole teaching credentials. No, nothing. It was like, here you go, let's go. And I'm staring at those books, and I'm going through it, and I'm like, oh my god, here we go. And I feel like that's an issue. I feel like because administrators are so busy, and when you get a new teacher, you want to support them as much as you can, but you got all these things going on. You got all you get these there's a lot of things going on, and for you to find time to sit with the new teacher and help the new teacher out, that's a must. But I feel like it doesn't happen all the time. I feel like new teachers sometimes are just kind of left to their own demise, um, and that's not a good thing. But it just happens because the nature of the game, where it's just such a you're administrator, you're so busy, you got so many deadlines and so many things you have to do, and sometimes you just assume that this person knows what to do, and this person is it's their first year. They don't know. They just got a teaching program with you. They just got a
Yeah,
teaching,
right,
and they're
right,
thrown in there, and they're like, okay, here you go. Here's the schedule. Here you do CKLA. Here's your curriculum, your math curriculum, your ELA curriculum. Here's iReady. These are the testing dates. This needs to be done. Where's your curriculum map? Oh, and don't forget, you have these big behaviors in the classroom. You've never written an IEP, or you've never attended an IEP, but you're going to attend an IEP too. These are the goals. No, no. Here's an IEP. Here you go, and then walk away. Like, here
right,
you
right.
go, and
Yeah,
then
you
walk
have an
away.
initial, a triennial,
Yeah,
good
you have
luck.
no idea.
Yeah,
What is this? What am I looking at? Where do I find the goals? What are the accommodations in this IEP? Like, just so many things. And I feel like that eats up new teachers. And if you don't have a good team, a good support system, if your school is not clicking and rolling, they're gonna get left behind. This is where we talk about teacher wellness. This is where these young teachers who just get thrown to the wolves, like, here you go. You're
hmm
gonna get eaten alive. You're gonna get eaten alive because there's so many demands that are being placed on you. Then you just talk about simple things like, but you need to get sleep. You need to get sleep. new teacher. You need to eat properly, new teacher. You
Right.
need to take care of your health, your body, new teacher. You have other commitments. You have a family, maybe you have kids. That's there too. You got to make sure you take care of your family, your kids. It's a lot, and teacher health, teacher wellness, that is so important. Um, let's talk about teacher health and wellness for a second.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Yeah,
And
as if you're a new teacher and that's thrown at you, how would you help a new teacher like that in a scenario that I just painted?
and it's challenging. It really it's very nuanced. It's an impacted conversation, and I will say that yeah, the demands of a new teacher are ridiculous. I will say that, and I could say they're absolutely ridiculous. It's too much. But then what's the compromise? That the demands are less to become arguably a leader in the profession that's the most important profession that impacts all other professions, so I don't know where the happy middle ground is. I really don't, but I will say this, it's a lot for new
Yeah.
teachers. And then I almost feel bad adding on the wellness component to them, and I feel silly bringing it up. Like, yeah, you have three initial IEPs, you have a triennial due, you're doing the reading intervention, math intervention. These are programs you've never explored before that take sometimes months to figure out, and we're throwing this at you. And the teacher response, and you get this as an administrator, they smile and say, okay, I got it. And they think they have it, they're going to go figure it out, right? But it's too great of a task for one person to manage. So
Mhm.
how I approach this initial conversation is actually through mentorship. You need to find a buddy,
Mhm.
right? So I knew my principal was too busy, obviously to provide me with that mentorship. It'd be unrealistic of me to have that expectation that he would provide me with that guidance. So I understand that my principal answered to, assistant soup, who answered to a soup, who answered to a school board. I understand that we all have bosses, right? And so um, I was given the advice in my teacher credentialing program to find like an accountability buddy or a mentor, within your department, preferably somebody that teaches something similar to you.
Yeah.
So my first few years of teaching, this guy by the name of Josh really helped me out. I remember even on the phone one night, it was like Friday at like, let's call it like 6 o'clock. And he was still looking over my shoulder, helping me write present levels and goals and going over the IEP. And he got picked up the phone, called his wife, and said, "Hey, I'm going to be about an hour or two late to our date night tonight. I hope you don't mind. I'm helping Mike, get on his feet with these IEPs." Without that type of support, I would have been absolutely drowning. So
Absolutely.
I had him as a mentor. I had Cheryl down the hallway that helped me with my content area stuff. I had Jill down the other hall that helped me with my behavior, some strategies to implement. So I, I would say build out your team first, and then let's start infusing those wellness elements. And I always like to use the analogy of a machine, right? The machine's got to be well oiled. You got to make sure it's frequently inspected. You got to make sure it's in good repair so that it functions well at a high level.
Yeah.
Like that machine, we have to take care of the machine that powers our operation as a classroom teacher. You're essentially, you know, chief executive officer, CEO, president, capitan of that classroom. You're
Mhm.
steering the ship, right? So it's imperative for you to be well, to show up at your best level of performance for your students so that they could be well. They have a great educational experience. And so I mentioned the few times that, and several times that I was kind of out of regulation when I was in the classroom. I didn't show up for my students, and they certainly reflected that, right? They
Yeah.
showed up how I showed up. They matched my energy. At times where I was a lot more balanced and regulated in my life, they also beautifully matched that energy, and the tone began to change in that classroom. So this is when I was started to explore teacher wellness. I was actually on the verge of a burnout. So the profession that I wanted more than anything, the profession that took my family out of poverty, the profession that gave me a life and benefits and the potential to start a family and all these things, the profession I loved more than anything, I was now burning out of. And I actually went so far as I wrote two resignation letters
Yeah.
to my principal. And I went back and, it was kind of like, all right, Mike, you can do this. And I remember sitting in my car in the parking lot, and I have no ego about this, but like literally crying, like, hey, how could I do another day? These students treat me terribly.
Hmm.
And I'm say, all right, just psych myself out. Cool. If you get in there, you make it to the end of the day, you reward yourself, you get like a double Western on the way home. Cool. All right. Make it the next day. Cool. If you make it to Friday, you get to go to your favorite restaurant or whatever. I'd like incentivize myself, and sometimes in unhealthy ways. And I remember when I was burning out in the cycle of burnout, and I'm going to kind of lead you to how I came into the wellness sector. I'm like, okay, I have to make it to Christmas. If I can make it to Christmas, then I could be myself for 2 weeks, the 2 weeks that we have off. I could let my hair down. I could just be me. And about that time, I'm like, I don't know that I'm coming back. And I wrote a letter of resignation. And I went to my dear old mom and I told her my plan. And she said, hey, that's fine, but you owe it to your students to stay to the end of the year.
Hmm.
At the end of the year, if you decide that you want to leave, that's fine. That's fine. That's on you. But don't make your students suffer through that cycle of, 5 or 6, guest teachers,
That's
substitutes,
right.
whatever it is.
Hmm.
So just hang in there for them and with them. But you also owe it to yourself to authentically try to kind of take care of, and she was in her own words saying, your wellness in
Yeah.
that time. And so I did. I did. And I said, okay, if I'm going to go out, I'm going to go out swinging. So I remember I came back from Christmas break with a new energy and said, all right, cool. I'm gonna tuck that letter, and I actually have it here still with me. I'm gonna tuck that letter under my desk. And in May, if this is still not working out, then cool. At least I tried. I did everything I could. So me going out swinging, what that looks like. Let me start exploring these wellness sectors. And as teachers, we're nerds. We're very outspoken about that. What do? We go do research. So let me look into research on motivation. Why are my students motivated? Why am I not motivated for this? Let me look
Yeah.
at motivation theory. Let me look at the dimensions of wellness. Let me look at mindset. Let me read stories of heroic people that have overcome immense challenges. Because at that time, John, teaching was my Mount Everest. Getting to the end of the year was like climbing Everest with no oxygen for me.
Hmm.
And so let me figure out how to get a little more balance and regulation. This led me to, all right, well, let me get back into the gym. Let me get back into spending time in nature. Let me start doing a little bit of meditative work. Let me journal. And I legitimately have like 20 years of daily journals now because it's a practice that I've implemented. And let me just reflect. Let me continue to build. And something funny happened about midway through spring of the year that I was going to resign. I started to flourish. I didn't know it at the time because I was
Yeah.
in the midst of change. And then by the end of the year, I'm like, wow, I didn't have to go up there and give that note to the principal. And people started noticing. And other opportunities were afforded to me in the classroom. I was teaching some really fun electives now that were a little bit out of my normal routine. And I was actually able to put into play those kind of wellness aligned activities that I was doing. And I started to show my students who I noticed were struggling with some of the same things. And these are students like you serve and you have served, the students that come to us with a variety of backgrounds, fluency levels, poverty, ability, disability, etc. And they started to really pick up on this and appreciate it. And in like you, just being ambitious, I wanted to get this message out to a larger audience. So I actually wrote a class called Mindset for Success. It was an elective course that all freshmen ended up taking in my old district. And
Nice.
this was to teach them how to be the best versions of themselves. And at that time, we just came into the vernacular of social and emotional learning. And so all of those dimensions and the castle framework we were able to bring into this mindset class, pitched it to the school board, pitched it to my principal, got it approved. And he's like, cool, you now teach that class 2 sections. Then the second semester of that class, he's like, okay, cool. I want this in a 6 period day. So every freshman at our school that's not in like an Avid or Puente program or impacted schedule with sports or something, that they all go through it because I believe that they need these skills. Pro-social behavior, emotional regulation, communication, how to manage your relationships, how to show gratitude. And I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of really good community partners in the social and emotional space. One of them, just to name drop, Tilly's Life Center. And so they partnered with me, brought in their meditation, their mindful coaches, their yoga coaches, their breathwork people, and showed these skills to, I would say, youth that were otherwise disadvantaged in that area, to help them thrive in their own educational journey and then at large in their own lives.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Um, so when you talk about just that whole burnout piece, when you talk about that burnout piece, and so when I started teaching, the first 2 years were rough. First 2 years were rough, and I felt like I wanted to quit, burnt out. Like I was like, I don't get it. I got thrown in here. What am I doing? But after that, like the third year, the fourth year, I felt like I was an amazing teacher. My ego was like super high. Like I'm the best teacher ever, and my ego was soaring. Like boom. And I worked at a Catholic school for 6 years. After that, I go to the local district, and I work for a year. I work for 2 years in local district, and then I get a RIF notice, a reduction of force letter, saying that you know what, you're done, you're done. At that time, I had like something like 3 master's degrees, 2 master's degrees. I had my teaching credentials. I had been working for was a 6, 7, 8 years, only 2 years with the district, and I got a RIF notice, and it humbled me. It humbled me like terribly. Like, oh my god, I can't believe it. How did they let me go? And I remember sitting on my table right here, and I'm thinking like, I gotta figure this. I gotta get out of this funk that I'm feeling. I'm feeling this funk, and just like you, I went to books, motivational books, different books on how just all these wellness books to try to lift me up. And I gotta figure out. I gotta change my mindset because my mindset is like garbage right now. I gotta figure this out, and those books helped me out, and it changed my mindset, and it got me motivated, and I was able to like get myself up, apply to other school districts, apply to I got a job at a charter school, and then the local district called me back again and said I get my job back, whatever. But I went through that whole cycle of like, I'm the best teacher in the world, then I get a RIF notice, and I'm like just the most depressed person, and I had to read some books, and here I go again. I'm back up again, going through these highs and lows in life. You talk about mentorship and getting a mentor, and how I think that's the best way. I think having a mentor is the best way. When I became an assistant principal for special education, I didn't have a special education background. And so when I was supposed to be running these IEP meetings, here I am with no special education background running these IEP meetings. I'm the one that's supposed to have a lot of these answers, and I'm sitting there with probably the least amount of confidence on the table. And thank God I had a mentor. Thank God I had a couple of people that, like I'd say, like during the IEP meeting, I'd be like, I'm just going to step out for a second. I step out, I get on the phone. I'm like, how do I close this IEP? How do I close this platform is not working. I try to close it. I can't close. How do I close this? Don't worry. Just go click this, click that, click that. Thank you so much. Just those moments where I could just pick up the phone and call somebody. And that saved me. So having those mentors, and for the young teachers out there, like Mike was saying, get yourself a mentor. Get yourself a mentor, somebody that's been around the block, that could help you out, that's positive, and show you the way. Because that saved me, and it sounds like it saved you. And just having those mentors at a school setting is extremely important. And then that
No, no
wellness
doubt.
piece, yeah, that
And
wellness piece.
it'd
I
be,
like what you're saying about that wellness piece.
for sure. And just kind of just to touch on the mentorship, it'd be worth mentioning that it's not always so easy to find these people, because we're all very guarded of our time. And,
Yeah.
teachers that are dialed in are like militant with their time. They're maybe not so forthcoming. So what do you do? And just a couple ideas: shamelessly bribe them. And so, well, things I've done. I mean, I bought everybody coffee and donuts. That was my jam. So, I would pour into the relationships, and we could definitely explore this further. But, part of my personal whole like thesis and philosophy is it's all about relationships.
Mhm.
And so,
Mhm.
seed into those relationships. And it's not like, you're not looking to like come up or take advantage of anybody, but rather in an authentic way. You want to get to know the people around you. So It's very easy to be a new teacher, come in at 8, leave at 3:15, work till 9 at when you get home, and kind of not have those interactions. But I would say awkwardly hang out at the school campus. Those doors that are open, the teachers that stay late. Spend time getting to know them, their teaching journey, kind of how they overcame the same hardships that you're overcoming, and then pour into them. Show up, have a good attitude, ask right questions, and I would say more often than not, they will show interest and reciprocate and mirror that energy and want to support you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Teacher wellness is extremely important. Exercise is extremely important. Sleep is extremely important. I think that that's something that gets neglected when you're struggling as a teacher. When you're struggling as a teacher, administrator, or whatever job you're at, when you feel overwhelmed or stressed out, um, your health is what takes the biggest hit. I feel. Um, some of the things that you talk about, you said you lift weights, you meditate, you do yoga, you do all these things.
Yeah, yeah. So those are some of the things, and then I like to set these like really lofty goals for myself. So I paddleboard, and I like to set like a race challenge like once a year, usually in the fall. I'll do a paddleboard race, and
Yeah,
so these are like races that I'm probably not qualified to enter, but I want to try it because I love doing difficult things, and
yeah,
also the flip side of that, it makes everything else I do so much easier. So, for example, I do a 100-mile bike race every spring. I'm not a real cyclist. I'm kind of more like off the couch guy. I exercise. I'm healthy. I'm in shape. All those things, but I'm not like in cyclist shape. So I go
yeah.
put myself around these people, and I challenge myself to do a 100-mile race in the hills. It's a lot, but once again, it makes everything else I do easier. So those difficult things that I have in the classroom, this crucial conversations I have with peers and students and administrators and superintendents and things, it makes all that, it puts it in perspective and makes it a lot more manageable. And then the other like unexpected byproduct is my students are really interested in what I'm doing. So if I'm training up for a race, or if I'm just in a particular phase of I'm working out a lot, and they're curious about it, and I get to share those kind of aspects of wellness and how I seek balance in my life with them.
Why do you think people avoid difficult things so much when it's like the key to a lot of answers? A lot of teachers, a lot of people in general avoid doing avoid having the hard conversation, avoid doing the difficult thing when all of the blessings and the good things are at the end of the difficult thing.
Yeah, we seek comfort, John. So we tend to default to what's most comfortable. And so think about it. Our lives are very comfortable. You, like I do, probably a big fluffy couch and a
Mhm.
nice bed with warm sheets and fluffy pillows and you know good food, but it wasn't always that way. you know and so we default to that zone of comfort on that fluffy couch and the fluffy bed and all those things. And so the same thing with those difficult conversations and encounters. Our default is to avoid and seek comfort, but we know that comfort's the killer of growth, and discomfort is really the accelerant of having that growth. So pushing oneself to that crunchy edge and sometimes beyond is where we grow. And you could even translate this further to like neuroscience and just building and beating down new pathways in our brain by doing difficult things. And so whether it's a bike race, or whether it's just getting out of your comfort zone and going up and introducing yourself to somebody new, or challenging yourself to have that a sticky conversation with a parent or a student, or a real conversation with the administrator, this is how we build those new pathways and how we continue to grow, evolve, and develop.
That's awesome. That's awesome. How long have you been a professor?
So I started off as an adjunct. Um, I was an adjunct for about 4 years,
Mhm.
and then this is my fourth full year, or fourth year of being a full time professor.
Yeah.
And so I've been kind of chasing down this goal and reeling it in, as I mentioned before, just as a way to cast my net at a larger audience
Mhm.
and focus on supporting those pre-service teachers as right before they're about to jump into the field.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you like it? You must like it a lot, I guess, huh?
I do, yeah, I
Yeah.
do. I'll tell you one thing. I I don't miss, the bell schedule. That's one thing that I don't miss.
Yeah.
So, after 20 something years, I don't miss that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do love being a professor. I love the freedom and flexibility it affords me. I love the freedom and flexibility of thought and how I meet my students' needs that it affords me. And it's still in exact alignment with what I do. It's just at a different phase of the conveyor belt. So where I started my career in early childhood and after school programs, I was at one side of the belt or the spectrum. And now I'm essentially doing the same, but just for a different audience.
Yeah.
And so I'm still teaching, I'm still meeting the needs of my students, I'm still modeling wellness, but it's at a very critical time in their lives. And so, I would say similar to like my high schoolers that were about to jump into their adult lives. And I was showing them all these kind of wellness aligned activities and kind of just perspective taking. I'm now able to do that with my soon to be teachers. And so, as I mentioned, I teach the last two like student teaching classes, the classes that support student teaching. So I'm able to grab the teachers and support the teachers right before they're about to make that full jump as full-time teachers in their classroom. So, for example, like my group of students right now, they're going to graduate in May, and a lot of them will either start teaching, in July or rather August or September of next year. So it's pretty timely, and this is kind of my last chance to make an imprint on them before they launch. And
That's
by
awesome.
imprint, I just want to be really clear with showing them how to show up and connect with their students.
That's awesome. And you do have a podcast, correct?
I do, yeah, yeah. So, Dr. Brightside, this is something I've toyed with a little bit. Um, not to the level of what you're doing. I really admire what you got going here, but yeah, I've toyed with it a little bit.
I'm low stakes. I'm low level here. But yeah. Thank you though.
Yeah, sure, sure, yeah, and really, the podcast just is a way to get the message out, and if anything, just to connect with like former colleagues and former students. And so,
Yeah.
being multi year educator as you are, we've met a lot of really cool people along the way, and a lot of really cool students, and this is the challenge of teaching. We don't see the fruits of our labor ever, you know,
Yeah.
off in the ether, right? Like we,
Mhm.
we know we put a lot of energy, time, sweat equity, and then we just hope we're like, oh, okay, I just hope it resonated.
Yeah.
But, with doing things like social media and the podcast, a lot of them are circling back, and commenting like, hey, that did make a difference. I remember when you taught that lesson in my class.
Yeah.
So it's really cool having that kind of feedback.
And you say to get the message out. What exactly is your message?
Yeah, my message is to, well, let me rephrase this. So for teachers to take care of themselves so that they could better take care of their students, and then for teachers to really focus on the relationship with students. And so that's positive teacher student relationship to me is everything.
And there's so much pushback on having on saying build relationships with students, especially students with difficult behavior. There's a lot of pushback on that. The other side to that would be, why do the students with the most difficult behavior have the most help? What about all the other students in the classroom who are supposed to, what about their education? How come we're spending so much time on these students? These students need to leave the classroom, need to get suspended, need to be put somewhere else for the sake of everybody else in this classroom. What would you say to that?
Yeah, and I would say, is that the answer? And has the punitive discipline model ever worked? And so I'm more about preemptively providing students with support so they don't get jammed up.
Yeah.
And if they do, and students do, you like I was, yeah, I was a teenager. I made silly
Mhm.
decisions all the time. I got jammed up a few times. And, are they given a teachable moment and a chance to grow, develop, and also with appropriate levels of support? And so, I love to restore behavior as opposed to provide those like punitive discipline models.
Yeah.
That's just one thought, and then the other thought is like, how do you meet the diverse needs of students in a classroom? And I'll preface this by saying, I don't have a good answer to this.
Hmm.
But like the way that it's seen is essentially there's thirds in the classroom, like top third, middle third, bottom third, right? And so where do you spend your attention? Where do you spend your energy? I would say most teachers hit for that middle third. Top third is going to take care of themselves. They're going to be okay. They'll be all right. That middle third, those are the ones that are showing promise. There's kind of students that can move from maybe like a C to a B, or like a D to a C. But that bottom third, the squeaky wheel, the one that's calling our energy and attention on, maybe those are the ones that we inadvertently pour the attention to, right? Because those are the ones calling for our attention. I would back out of it and say we need to be methodical by how we organize and meet the needs of all the students in our classroom. So in classrooms in California, you could have what is it, 36 students, right? It's a lot of kids. And so how do you meet the needs of all those 36 students?
Yeah.
And I always say just a step at a time, a day at a time. And so I'm a big data nerd, so I'd always track data and probably like nothing official for everyone. It wasn't like I had these spreadsheets and graphs and stuff. I legitimately had a yellow legal pad with my students' names written on it with the
Hmm.
days of the week, and I put a check mark that
Hmm.
I checked in on the student or I supported that student. But I needed that visual to see where I was spending my time and my energy and my attention so that I was able to essentially spread the love out to that entire classroom, to at least check in with every student. And then, and second, to at least provide a little bit of support a few times a week, extra support for every single student in that classroom.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a tough question. It's a tough question, and I don't think there is an easy answer for it. My thing is I always try to build student relationship with students with the most difficult behavior, and if I could win them over, then I've won the class, because those are students that are going to derail me from my teaching. So if I can win them over, then I've won the class, and then everything becomes easy. So that's where I would spend my time with, is just building those relationships, but holding high academic standards, high behavioral standards. Like, this is what is expected in this classroom, but at the same time, just building that relationship. And the way I see it is you just got to create a safe environment. Create a safe environment, you know, routines, procedures, that kind of deal. Just keeping the class safe. And if you just do that much, then you've almost won it all. And then the next part, like I've talked about this before, but just demonstrating love, like biblical type of love. Like, love is patient, love is kind. You gotta be patient, you gotta be kind. And then you gotta just boost up their self esteem. You do those kind of things, you're going to win. You're going to win. You will have a successful year. I'm not gonna say that everything's perfect. You're not gonna have a perfect year, but you will have a successful year. You will have a relationship with students where you could just be like, "Hey, look, that's enough. I need you to stop." And because of that relationship, sometimes that's all you need to do. Even a look, like, "Come on, come on." A
Right.
look will get somebody to just stop in their tracks because you have a relationship with them. But if you don't have a relationship with them, something like, "Come on," they're gonna be like, "Psh, you don't even care about me. You don't even why would I even listen to you?" And I understand that so clearly, because in my life, if I felt like I was disrespected, or if I felt like somebody didn't care about me, and then they're gonna go ahead and ask me to do something, or I'm like, "Come on. Ooh, why?
Right.
Why are you
Who's this
doing
guy?
this? Yeah,
Yeah.
what are you doing? Like, come on." And so for me, that's why I understand it in my mind so clearly. Like, no, you just build that relationship. Build It's like a bank account. Like, put deposit into that bank account, and when you have to make that withdrawal, you have something to withdraw. There is something in that bank account. When you have to make that ask, you've built a relationship. You can make that ask. But if you don't have nothing, you're negative. You're pulling from
Right.
something that's not even there. So
Which
good
is
luck.
so unrealistic,
Yeah.
And, some strategies that have worked for me that would work for new teachers or even veteran teachers. I really made it a mission to know every student's story.
Mhm.
And so this takes an incredible amount of effort and a little bit of time. And starting day one of the school year, I worked diligently on building that positive classroom culture through getting to know my students. And there are some students, John, that were just so difficult because for whatever reason, adverse childhood experiences, trauma, whatever, they weren't so forthcoming with their story, their trust, and all those things. So those are the ones I would pour into even more. And like you were saying, those ones, once you have them, and John, as I do, these are our leaders,
Mhm.
right? For better or for worse, they're our leaders. So some ways I would do that were I would greet every student every day at the door. I mean, I'm out there in the rain, the sun, whatever, the wind. If I'm not standing at the door, there was a problem,
Mhm.
So they would expect that as part of my brand. Hey, what's up? Good morning. How are you? Sometimes it'd be like, loosely academically related, but mostly just to check in. And then sometimes I'd put a question up, like, tell me something I don't know about you. Right. And I would listen intently. And so, I would listen for these cues. And I'm not a big sports guy, but you better believe it. I learned a lot about the sports that my students were into because I
Yeah.
wanted to be able to speak that language with them. And I always give the example. I had a student that was highly respected in the community. He was a leader in some of the, let's call them external organizations in the community. And everybody looked up to him,
Mhm.
but he did not have that, any level of respect for any authority figure. And I
Yeah.
later found out why. And so this became kind of my focus is like, I'm going to figure out something. Right. And so he made the mistake one time of telling a student that he had a boxing match on the weekend. And it was a high stakes thing for him. I overheard it. So I asked the other student, what do you say? He's a boxing match. He's really looking forward to it. Whatever. He's going to, pound this guy in the third ring around or whatever. Okay. Hey, where does he box? And he told me the name of the gym. So I showed up. I
Mhm.
showed up on Saturday morning. It was early. And I remember the look on his face when he saw me, and I went up and shook his parents' hand and I sat down. And then after the ring, after the match, and he won, he came over. He's like, what are you doing here? I'm like,
Yeah.
man, I just wanted to see you in action. I'm
Yeah.
gonna I'm gonna go, but I'm really impressed. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing a little bit of your life with me.
Yeah.
And so I do
Never
things
forget.
like that.
Yeah.
I show up.
He'll never forget that. He'll never forget that forever.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah.
But
And it
showing up
works.
is huge. Yeah. It works. It works. Those kids that there's these kids in the classroom where if you just approach them, like if you just directly approach them, they might push back. They might be like, no. Like if you were to go up to them and say like, hey, even if it's something like, hey, would you like this donut? Because you're telling them, would you like this donut? They're gonna say no, even though they want a donut.
Right.
One of my moves that I always use all the time is, I want to give this student a donut. So I'm going to give donuts to three people before him. You want a donut? They take it. You want a donut? They take it. You want a donut? You take it. And I get it. You want a donut? Oh yeah, they'll take it. If I ask like if I'm on the playground and I'll ask the student like, oh let's do a relay race. The student that I'm trying to make a connection with, he's gonna tell me no. But if I get all the other students to be like, hey, let's have a relay. Come on, let's go have a relay race. Let's go have a relay. And then I look at the student that I want to have the relay race. Hey, let's go have a relay race. They're gonna more likely say yes because everybody is doing it. Everybody is doing it. So I always do this with these students that are that are at arm, they keep you at arm's distance and like, no, I can't. I always ask multiple students before I ask that one student, and that's the one student that I need to make that connection with. I want him to join the game. I want him to play checkers with me. So I'm gonna have a tournament of checkers with multiple people, and then eventually I'm gonna get that person to play checkers or whatever we're doing. We're gonna play kickball. You wanna play kickball? You wanna play kickball? Do you wanna play kickball? All right, cool. You'll be on my team. That's what I do all the time to get these students that are like, I don't want anything to do with this adult. I don't like
Right.
adults. I'm gonna keep you away. If I could get everybody else to say yes, you're the next yes in line because everybody else yes, 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 yes. And so I use that technique all the time. For if you
That's great.
teachers who are listening to this, try it. It works. Don't just go directly to the student that you're trying to get to say yes, to do something, to make that connection with. They're gonna say no. Do you make other people say yes before you get him to say yes or her to say yes? But works all the time. Use
I mean,
it.
that's great. That's
Yeah.
great. I love it. It's so funny. I did something similar. I had a couple students who were like on the track team, and they were really fast, and I would banter with them, and just playful banter. It's
Mhm.
like, man, you're lucky I'm not wearing my Nikes today. I'd have
Yeah.
to stop class and I'd have to show you. And they're like,
Yeah.
yeah, right. And so I'd purposefully not wear athletic
Yeah.
shoes, and then you know I'd catch them one day. I'd show up and I'd kind of throw my feet up at the desk and just look at them, and they're smiling. They're like, it's on. And I'm like, I'll tell you what, it's not that easy. I'll let you earn the chance to race me. Right. And so we play this banter thing. And just by me showing that interest and having that fun and engaging dialogue
Yeah.
with them, it turned the table quick.
Oh yeah. You have a little fun with the kids. You have that back and forth with them, a little teasing, a little like trash talking, a little bit.
Oh yeah.
It goes a long way. It goes a long way. All the time.
Well, for
So
educators too, and this makes it fun, and I will say this: there was no days that drug on in my career because that banter is what kept me alive, And it's like, I had to be on my game. I'd listen to stand-up comedy on the way to work, and I would just keep myself on my toes so that I'm ready. And we're going back and forth, and to get the kids cracking up, and they're kind of clowning on me. That was part of the culture. Is like also not taking myself too seriously,
that's right.
you know.
That's
But
right.
there is a balance, high
There is a
level
balance.
standards, high expectations, but showing you like we can have fun if we operate within those parameters.
Today I was in the lunch line. Today I was in the lunch line. There was a choice. There was macaroni and cheese and chicken. That was the choices. And so I was standing right there and I was watching the kids get lunch. And my goal here is to just talk to every single kid that passes through so I can make a connection. Let them know that hey, the assistant principal's out here just joking with us or whatever. So they're coming out and I'm like, mac and cheese or chicken. They're like, I got chicken. They gotta get some muscle with that protein in there. Mac and cheese or chicken? I got mac and cheese. Oh, mac and cheese. Oh, well, why'd you get mac and cheese? You don't want no protein? You get the chicken? He's like, nah, I wanted mac and cheese. I'm like, all right. Mac and cheese or chicken? Like every kid that passed by, I was like, mac and cheese or chicken? He's like, I got a salad. I was like, all right, salad's all right. Salad's all right. So I was just like me making my presence felt with every single kid with a question that they're put back like why is this guy asking me mac and cheese or
That's so
chicken
funny. That's
but
so funny.
but it was just like they were smiling. They're like, wait, nobody's ever asked me mac and cheese or chicken that strongly before. Like that's never happened before. Oh, so it was funny, but the kids had a kick out of it, and like so, and there was a line, so they knew it was coming because they saw me say it to the kid in front of them, so they knew that I
Mac
was
and
going to
cheese.
ask them
Yeah.
mac and cheese or chicken. But little things like that.
Right, and it is fun, and it shows how we love and how we care, and perhaps a little bit different of a way. But I do want to acknowledge that not every teacher is like you and I. So I aim to be the kid magnet. If I had 4,000 students in my high school, I want to know 4,000 students. I want
Yeah,
these daps, these high fives in the hallway, and like you, Mr. B, right
yeah,
across the
hmm
hallway. I wanted to be that guy, right? And that's more in
yeah,
alignment with my personality. I'm outgoing. It was brought to my attention when I started working with teachers that, hey, Dr. B, not everybody's like you. And so it kind of caught me flat-footed because I'm like, what? Not everybody wants to joke about mac and cheese? That's or mac and cheese or
mac and cheese
chicken?
and chicken,
That's
mac and
funny.
cheese. Yeah,
That's funny. And then I started thinking about it. I'm like, you know what? I think you're right. But teachers could show up and provide safe harbors for students in different ways. So for guys like you and I, it's high fives in the hallway and mac and cheese and chicken. But for other teachers, it may be like, here's my calm spot at lunchtime. I invite you to come in and have a
yes,
safe spot, right? That's their style of communicating love. So I don't want to diminish that. I love the mac and cheese and chicken talk. That's my language. But I think it's important to acknowledge the other side of this too.
absolutely. And a good school has multiple tools in the toolbox.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
have the mac and cheese and chicken guy, and then they have the person they have the person that has a calming space and can give a hug and it can make you feel warm and and still be safe. And yes, you have multiple tools in the toolbox, and that's what a good school has. All of that, it has it all. So,
For
Mr.
sure.
V, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Before I end my
Thank
podcast,
you.
I always say I always ask my guests, what are some tips that you could give to future educators? And you work with future educators all the time, so this is probably right up your alley here. What's one or two good tips that you could give to future educators?
All right. So first and foremost, focus on relationships. It's all about relationships. Second one, I would say dial in your wellness, invest in yourself. Investment in yourself is an investment in your students and your classroom success. The third one, have fun. Don't forget
Yeah.
why you got into this in the first place. It's all right to smile. It's all right to fumble and goof up. It's all right to razzle the kids a little bit about mac and cheese and chicken. It's all
Mhm.
good. Have a little fun with what you're doing. It's the most important profession that impacts all other professions. enjoy what you're doing, and just keep in alignment with why you got in the profession in the first place.
Oh, well, Michael, Dr. V, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I greatly appreciate your time. Um, we had a good conversation about teacher wellness, and it was great to hear your story on how you got into the field of education. So I greatly appreciate you being here on the podcast.
Appreciate you. Keep doing what you do and keep spreading that message about positive relationships and supporting our students. So thank you. I'm humbled and honored to be here. I appreciate it.